You're listening to PatchBay on tymkrs.
Welcome to PatchBay. I'm Whisker. I produce lots of podcasts and TV shows on YouTube, and I've been doing this for a couple of years now, and been having to learn a lot of tricks, so I kind of know a thing or two about a thing or two. And my co-host here is Shane. Shane, could you introduce yourself?
My name's Shane. I work for Platinum Gold Studios in Winnipeg. I've been engineering and making records for about 11 years, give or take. And then 11 years professionally and about 3 years prior to that. So I know lots of tips and tricks.
Yeah, I was doing live sound years and years and years ago, and that's where I sort of picked up the beginnings of all of this. And it surprisingly, a lot of what I learned doing live sound applies almost directly to doing podcast recording and AV production, because it's all about making sure that everything is good on the way in, and you can't rely on fixing stuff in post. But in the studio there, I'm sure it's kind of sometimes the opposite.
Yeah, us guys tend to be a little more babied, I guess, because we can always go back and start again. I normally, when I do live sound, which I don't do very often, I normally have the handshakes for about the first 3 or 4 songs, and then once everything is going according to plan, then I start feeling better. But there's definitely something to be said for having to do it right the first time versus going back and redoing stuff over and over again.
We were tracking here in the studio this weekend. One of my friends from Albuquerque came up. We
Cool.
don't get to see each other very often because it's so far away. You know, Minnesota to Albuquerque. That's not a trip most people ever make
I've
in a
actually
lifetime.
I've actually been to Albuquerque.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
kind of a I don't know. It's kind of a cool town, but it's kind of really boring town at the same time. All the houses look the same.
yeah. I had fun. Well, we went to Santa Fe as well, but there was this really good restaurant right close to the university, and they had an orange juicing machine, and we couldn't get enough of that. We were getting this is like completely fresh orange juice. But
That's one thing you
anyway,
can definitely get in Albuquerque is really, really good food. Every
yeah,
time we go down there to visit, it's like we're eating out every meal because, oh, green chili. Oh, yeah.
yeah. And you know what was funny? We ended up in, of all places, we ended up in an Irish pub in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So like, way to take the wrong turn, kind of. But it was fun. I had a really good time. We actually went on the tramway as well when we were there.
So my buddy plays in a couple of bands down there. Albuquerque has a pretty hoppin' music scene and swing dance scene and all that sort of thing. And he's usually stuck playing upright bass because you know if your band finds out that you can play upright bass, that's all you're going to be allowed to play for the
Yeah.
rest of your life. So I thought I'd invite him up and let him play lead guitar for a bit in sort of a little throw together band. And it was really fun. You know, kind of had to tear the studio apart and hook everything up for more music tracking stuff. But yeah, so I spent the whole weekend just sort of figuring out how to get together a band uh, from scratch and record it from scratch and all that sort of thing. So this
So
week, my
and
head's
write
what's that?
and write
Yeah,
like and write material as
well,
well.
we
Yeah.
wrote all the songs, wrote all the lyrics,
Nice.
reconfigured the studio, sort of figured out who's going to play what. It was really fun.
Did you, while you were recording this, was it live off the floor, or was it more a piecemeal kind of situation?
Totally track by track.
Yeah.
I think there was maybe one track where I multi-tracked a couple of parts at the same time, just because it needed be a bit more living. It needed to have a bit more back and forth to it. So yeah, other than that, it was
Mhm.
totally one track at a time.
That's fun though. So how many songs did you guys end up getting done?
Over the course of 2 days, we tracked two songs, and I still have to do all the mixing and mastering and all that on them.
All the fun stuff. Uh, sorry. Um. So okay. So the guy, obviously, because he normally plays stand-up bass, did he end up playing any stand-up bass this weekend or no?
No, I don't have a big bass here. Uh,
Oh, okay.
I'm kind of glad we didn't because he's such a good guitarist that it's really a shame they don't let him play. He
Right.
does a lot of like rockabilly and sort of. Uh, we managed to do a really fun one using. Oh. ham bone rhythm. Really fun.
Okay, I have to look that up. That's not ringing a bell for me. It's a rockabilly term, though, obviously.
Well, it's
Right?
just like oh, I forget the name of the guy. He'd kick my butt if he heard this, which he probably will. Darn it.
Hmm. Um, yeah. Well, the thing that keeps coming to my mind is like I got walk 47 miles of barbed wire, blah blah blah. That song. Who do you love? Got that kind of sort of feel. I think that's sort of what Hambone is. I'm gonna have to double check. uh, okay, so getting back to the recording this weekend, as far as tracking the guitars were concerned, what did you end up doing? Did you have fun?
We did a couple of fun things. I've got this little 5 watt Epiphone Valve Junior amp. You may have run across them before. They're a little
They're
one
super.
1 2 AX7 and like a 6V6 or something like that. And basically, I've gutted it and sort of modified it a little bit to give it a lot more mid range. And I
Mhm.
built a little plywood cabinet for a single 12-inch, and I threw a full range driver in there just to get that that this is not a professional sound. You know that
Yeah,
like
the
actual
whoomp.
yeah, it's got that honky sort of not quite right sound that everybody applies a lot of tricks to try to get to, and they could just like build a really cheap cabinet that's wrong in the right ways to get the
Yeah,
same effect. Yeah,
I
and
was gonna say
then
the other thing you can do is buy a Telecaster because they tend to do that.
yeah. The guitar we used on the electric guitar pieces was a Dan Electro U1 that has the single coil pickup, just one of them in it. It's one of the reissues, so it has that sort of silver tone kind of sound to it.
Yeah, that was
And
it's got a lipstick tube pickup in it, I believe, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
And I've modified it a bit, so it doesn't have the original tone knob in it. It's just straight out, and then I deal with the tone in between with better equipment because they just had a little RC filter built onto the knob.
Was it was the tone control in that thing? Was it a pot or no?
Yeah,
What was the thing?
it's got a double pot. It's got the knob on the knob. There's two of them together. So
Oh,
it's
right.
got two potentiometers in there. One of them is for, attenuation, and the other one controls the roll-off frequency of a little RC filter. So it's just a capacitor and a variable resistor sort of deal. And I,
Right.
I
There's
took
a
that bit out.
yeah, there's right now there's it just came out in the last few years, I believe, but it's called a grease bucket circuit for uh and they use it's a Telecaster mod, but apparently what it does is I think it ties into the volume control as well, so that when you do roll off, it keeps the high end more. Or I don't know. You'd have to Google it. But a friend of mine just did it to his telly, and he seems to quite like it. It's not as bitey, I guess, as the regular Telecaster thing. It might be kind of a fun thing to check out anyway. But yeah, I forgot those. I was thinking 56U too, but those down electros had those uh those two knob control things built in, which are kind of odd, but they do the job, I suppose.
Yeah, well, they do the job not as well as I wanted to do it, so I just ripped it out and replaced it with a new one. But
My
when
brother,
you're electronics sort of hacker kind of guy, you can do that sort of thing and get exactly the sound you want, which is always nice.
yeah. So did you guys wind up using any pedals or anything, or was it just mostly amp?
We really didn't need to. The
Yeah.
tone straight out of that single coil into that tube amp had its own just sort of perfect sound. I threw a Cascade. That's a little ribbon microphone company. Their Victor model. I threw one out in front of the cab and ran that in through a little 128X7 preamp into my mixer, and that
Nice.
gave us a really nice sound.
Uh, like a mix or a preamp that you built, or one that you had?
This is one that I have laying around. It's a little Art
Oh yeah, yeah. I
Tube
like those
MP
actually.
Studio. It's about the cheapest little tube preamp you can buy, but it's really for whatever reason the design on it is just really good. I mean, I use it for all sorts of things. It's $20 well spent. I think I got it used on eBay or something.
I've got at the studio. I have an Art Tube MP, which has built-in compression and a really hard limiter in it.
Yeah, we
Um,
use that
so
OPL button on there to get the compression effect, and it just totally worked great.
yeah, this might be the one that I've got is a little older. But I have that one, and I have just a regular Art dual channel tube pre, which is basically the same idea without the compression, but you do have that
Is that
plus
the
gain.
rack mount version?
Yeah, the
Yeah, I
rack
have
mount.
one of those in my rack too.
Yeah,
It's
I've
that
actually
one's
made a couple of records
okay.
just those.
Yeah, that one's okay, but it seems to be really noisy for me, the rack mounted dual channel version.
Yeah, I did a record once where all the guitar tones were that overdriven with it was a country record, so it was a Telecaster with a compressor, like a guitar compressor, going into the tube preamp, and that was it. No outside speaker emulations or anything, just and actually ended up sounding quite well. I think I added a little bit of reverb on a few tunes, just but that was basically the gist of the thing. So I noticed when I was watching your guys' YouTube video that you guys have a crap load of keyboards as well.
Yeah, yeah, we have a nice little collection of keyed instruments. Fortunately, we really didn't use anything out of that room this
That's
weekend.
what I was getting at. Was I was wondering if you guys had, but
Yeah,
that's cool.
I like Wurlitzer electric pianos and Hammond organs and honky tonk pianos and stuff like that. And I also build my own synthesizers from scratch. So yeah, we've got a lot of keys laying around, but this was more of a sort of just raw, gritty, Southwest Americana swamp
Rock and
music
roll
kind
thing.
of thing,
Yeah,
you know?
cool. And so bass and drums and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, I instead of using drums this time, we decided to go totally um lo-fi and DIY. For our drum kit, we used a big Dreadnought Alvarez acoustic guitar, and we
Okay.
threw a I think it was a little flashlight underneath the strings just to keep them from ringing out so much, and we used that
Hmm.
for most of the percussion sounds. And
Cool.
we threw a bunch of really light washers that we had laying around in an old cigar box, and that was our higher end percussion sound, sort of a maraca
Airdrop
ish.
situation. Yeah. Cool. That actually sounds like fun. I've done a lot of reading on um, a bunch of some of my favorite albums. They some of these guys would tend to do things with like alternate percussion where they would create stuff or find weird things to use as percussion, like a jar with water in it and just weird ass, pardon me, weird sort of percussion. I know specifically on Melancholy Infinite Sadness, I know they used just a ton of sort of strange percussion, and a lot of the times there weren't even really drums on some of the songs. It was just it's kind of fun to come up with stuff. As to whether it works out in the final mixes, you know, after the fact, but it's fun to do those little
Yeah,
experiments.
I love to use like strange stuff to get in the percussion. You like to have your really low bassy part. You need to have some sort of mid range to pull it together, and you need to have some sort of higher bit. So I always think of it that way. You need at
Mm.
least those three bands of frequency covered, and as long as you get those nailed down, you're good. And you can play with just using anything. You don't need a really expensive drum kit to get some really cool sounds if
Oh,
that
agreed.
is the sort of sound that you're going for, something more real. Because
Yeah,
a lot of our favorite recordings back in the day, they would play all sorts of interesting and strange things that professional studio musicians may not think of right away. But
yeah,
you can always go back and retrack in the drums with MIDI using samples if the thing didn't turn out the way you wanted to. It's real easy these days.
yeah. No, agreed. I was going to mention actually, there's a guy named Dan Frechette, uh, Frechtette. He's from Winnipeg, and he's kind of getting kind of quite big now, but I remember he used to he's always been sort of a solo act, and he used to just play shows with his acoustic, and he'd close his acoustic guitar case and he'd stomp on it, and he'd put a like not hard, but he would stomp on it to get kind of the low end, and he'd have a tambourine at the other end, that would just kind of, you know, sympathetically bounce along, and that was just sort of a shtick, and it was always cool. It
Yeah,
was a
it's a
cool way
great
to a very
authentic
human way of doing it.
sound. And if
Yeah,
you're going for that sort of authentic sound, then I would totally recommend doing it that way because at the end of the day, it sounds a lot more authentic than a really tight drum kit would sound.
that's how I
Um,
recorded them too. Actually, was just straight like that.
there's a couple other guys out there that listeners may not have heard of yet that you should definitely check out if you like that kind of thing. On YouTube, look for a guy named Hollow Belly. He's out of the UK. He basically has a drum kicker hitting the side of a suitcase and a little guitar made out of his daughter's paint set. It was a little tin box. He made a cigar box guitar sort of thing out of that, and he just plays those two things and
That's hilarious.
totally pulls it off. And there's another guy name goes by C6 Steve. He's actually pretty successful in the UK and in Europe. He's sort of a hobo American sort of singer, and he basically has a cigar box with a piezo pickup glued to the inside of it that he stomps on for his percussion, and he plays old broken down guitars. His son is a really good guitar tech. He can make the nastiest, gnarliest, old beat up acoustic guitars just sound beautiful.
Nice. Like speaking to that, normally as long as you can get a guitar that doesn't have a completely warped neck, the old ones tend to sound quite a lot better than the new ones, uh, acoustic or electric or otherwise. I mean, there's those rare occasions when you need to change pots and things like that, but the ones that have been loved tend to sound better anyway. Not like there are old guitars you can buy out there that haven't been used; they've just sat on somebody's wall. But um, yeah, all the ones I have are well beaten in.
Yeah, I don't believe in babying guitars. All of mine have, belt buckle scratches and zipper scratches, and yeah, they're
Speaking to that, I remember when I bought my Telecaster, I went to a band practice, and this one guy that was in my band, he was very much into the buy a guitar, baby it, and then try to sell it on eBay for more money kind of thing. And I remember I came down and had this huge belt buckle on my Telecaster. He's like, "You're never gonna be able to sell that." I'm like, "What makes you think I'm gonna sell this damn thing?" And then I just took the guitar and I grabbed like the body of it and just scratched it back and forth on my belt buckle. And he's just looking at me like, "Oh my god, you're good." I'm like, "It's a $200 guitar. The best I'm gonna get out of it is 150 after I beat the crap out of it." But and my Strat, I've actually bounced it off a wall. That thing stays in tune no matter what you do to it. It's amazing. I don't know what the deal is, but I lucked out with the two that I have.
it's really interesting getting into different guitars. A lot of guys will like the Stratocasters and the Telecasters and the Gibson Les Pauls, and it seems like almost everything is recorded on one of those three. And
Yeah, Telecasters to a lesser degree, I find. I've actually been kind of enjoying playing. I've tried out a few SGs lately, and I've quite enjoyed them. Um, but yeah, Stratocasters are sort of the norm. It's funny when I got my Telecaster, nobody was playing them. Like nobody, even in big bands, weren't playing them. And then like a few months later, it was like I saw all these huge bands playing Telecasters. It was, what the heck? It was like when all the guitar cuts cut their hair. But yeah, no. Getting back to oddball guitars.
my guitar that's my go-to one here when I'm working on stuff is actually an Epiphone Biscuit resonator wood body slide, bottleneck slide guitar. And I modified that to have a piezoelectric pickup right built onto the screw that screws the cone to the biscuit and wired up to a jack. And that's, of course, a high impedance element. So you have to sort of run it through impedance matching to plug it into most things. But once you're good enough to know what you have to do to get it working well with
At it,
standard
yeah.
equipment, man, oh man, is that a good sound?
Yeah, it's a nice guitar. I was looking at that one too. I recently recorded a Fender Resonator acoustic guitar. It didn't have a maybe it did have a Pezio in it built in. I can't remember off the top of my head. I remember miking it, but he might have had both. But that that session, that guy had recorded like almost everything he wrote with that guitar, and like a good percentage of the album, he ended up playing that guitar. It must have had a pickup because he ran it through an amp as well, which was I've never really ran acoustic guitars through amps and had the greatest success in the world, but it was a kind of a rock sort of situation. And he actually ran distortion as well on the acoustic a couple of times too, which kind of created a more interesting tone than the usual gleamed electric, distortion.
Yeah, you really don't need to amplify resonators because it's so damn loud to begin with. But if you get the right kind of pickup in them and you use them to feed a nice overdriven saturated tube amp, you can get some really, really deep swamp Louisiana, just hoot nanny sort of sound to it, and it's really
Mhm.
fun.
Well, this was actually a like a sort of a rock band kind of context. So yeah, it was definitely a different thing. Actually, that guitar, I found that guitar not to be that loud, just acoustically, amazingly enough, which I found weird. I'm just gonna post a link in the chat room to the to the guitar that he had, but um, anyway. So other than the 56 or the U1 and the resonator, what other stuff were you recording on those?
We kept things really simple. The only other thing we did was for vocals, and for that we used a really strange thing. You might get a kick out of this. It was a Shure 520DX green bullet microphone, which is usually used by harmonica players.
Yeah.
It's got one of those really big, I think it's a crystal element in it. It sounds basically like you're talking over a telephone. Really good telephone, but a telephone.
Mhm.
It
The
totally
telephone
chops
nonetheless.
off the low end and some of the high end as well, and it just sort of sits in the upper human vocal range really well. It's very
Mhm.
clear. It's very nasally, and we ran that in through again that art a little single tube preamp and
Mhm.
into the mixer, and you can get a really, really authentic, um, lo-fi, but really nice sound out of that. If you're going for sort of a blues heavy sound, it's a
Yeah,
good trick
I've
to
actually
know.
done that. I've done that before with those. Um, I've recorded them straight, clean through like whatever the mic preamp that I was using at the time, and I've actually recorded them through Marshalls and mic'd the Marshall, which was kind of entertaining. And that was more of like sort of really dirty kind of background vocal or screaming chorus sort of situation. But yeah, those are actually really amazing mics. I've used them on a kick drum as well, actually, as a second mic, just for some weirdo top end kind of, the real smack that you look for
Yeah.
sometimes. And they're a fun mic to have. Another one, do you have any boundary microphones?
I've got quite a few microphones, but we usually stick to condensers and ribbons around here for the most part.
I was going to talk about the boundary microphones. I have a couple of really cheap, like Radio Shack ones. They're neat. They're if you take a chance to Google one, it's a flat microphone. They're usually like an electret kind of thing, or like a um, my brain just turned off. The opposite of condenser, like a 57 type of mic,
Mm,
dynamic.
yeah.
But they're really neat because you can tape them on things. You can tape them in things. I've done stereo miking in front of a guitar amp, which I read in a magazine and I actually tried, and that was kind of neat because you got floor rumble. Um, yeah, and just sort of putting them in different places. Like a lot of times when I record, I tend to, if I have an open channel, I'll record like the default miking technique or what sounds good. And then when I get a chance, I'll usually try and do something odd like that, just depending on what we're going for. But sometimes when I mic an acoustic guitar player, I'll mic him from the front, and then I'll mic him up and over his right shoulder, which isn't really a default miking technique by any stretch, but it does kind of create a bit of a warmth that sometimes is missing when you've got the mic very close to the sound hole, and you're getting more of the pick scrapes and those types of things. Um, so yeah, no, but definitely try out a boundary mic because they're a lot of fun. Like you tape them to the back or inside your 12-inch cabinet, and you're going to get a whole different ball of wax.
Well, that's cool. I'll have to consider that then.
And the Radio Shack ones that were around, you can get for ridiculous cheap. I think they have 1/4-inch plugs on them, but it's an easy solder job to change it to. I know all ours were bastardized and became XLR ones, but they're a lot of fun. Actually, for a long time, I was using one of those as my talkback mic. It's the one thing nowadays. A lot of consoles don't have built-in talkback mics, um, especially on the sort of not low-end scale, but I mean even some of the bigger boys they don't have talkback mics. So I tend to run sort of a stereo mix for myself, and then a separate headphone mix for everybody that just gets my feed for my talkback. So I was using a boundary mic on my desk. Um, the bugger of that is if you're doing any kind of keyboarding, people tend to get clicks in their ear, so you have to remember to turn it off.
Last time I used a console, they still came with them. It's interesting.
Yeah, well, the new in the box thing is really like if you buy a Pro Tools box, it doesn't have talkback unless you get like the Control 24, which is a few years older, the newer one. Um, any of them, I use a Yamaha O1B at work for my main sort of preamp and headphone mixer box, and it doesn't have talkback. Uh, I have a Soundcraft 2400 that I used to use. I don't use it anymore, but it had all kinds of talkback. I had 3 different types of talkback. It had main talkback, different routing for talkback too, so I could just talk to the drummer if I wanted to, which was kind of handy actually if you wanted to tell them a story and didn't want everybody else to hear it. They need to be told stories once in a while just to make them happy.
Yeah. You don't want to have to replace them 5 times in the movie.
No, exactly. They do have these sort of talkback solutions, though. They have these sort of like monitoring stations. Like there's PreSonus has one called the Central Station that allows you to monitor 3 different mixes that has talkback. You can route headphone mixes from it. Those types of things are cool, and those are the new solutions that people have started creating. But the thing is, you lose a channel too. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah,
So
we use you can't buy it anymore, unfortunately, but a Line 6 tone port UX8 is our main interface back and forth to the computer. And rather than having a separate talkback unit, I use the matrix routing in here to sort of allow, say, you up there in Winnipeg can hear different things in your ears than I can hear right now. And other people in the studio here, I can set them all up to hear whatever I want them to as well. So it works out
that's
really well.
that's handy, and no latency too, obviously, or little to none.
Yeah, because it's all done right there through the really, really snappy DSP chips that are on board in there.
Yeah, but I mean, for an example, like when if you're recording in a different room, it's nice to be able to have that, ability to talk to somebody in their headphone mix, um, without having to get up and like run down the stairs, or you know what I mean. So, well, obviously in the studio you can't not have talkback, but like I say, they haven't really built it into consoles anymore, and then to build it into the low latency monitoring solutions that a lot of companies have created. Like Motu has a really cool one called QMix DSP, which you should check out. It'll make you want to buy Motu products. They have this really cute little video that tells you all these different mixes and all the stuff that you can do pre fader, pre like being recorded. You can do like EQ on every channel coming in, compression, pre or post. So it's like you can just have the compression effect without it actually recording compression. Some neat stuff.
All right, well,
Mm-mm.
that's all the time we have for this week.
That is all the time we have for this week.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Well, that was quick.
what we need you guys out there that hear this Now, if you hear this years later and whatever, this doesn't apply. But if you hear it here in the near future, if you guys could do us a favor and email us at feedback@tymkrs.com and let us know what parts of this sort of dialogue you got a kick out of and what you want to hear more of. That'll help us figure out where this show needs to go because this is brand new raw. We're just winging it, folks. And if you let us know what direction to fly, we'll get there. You can find this show every Friday at patchbay.tv. There'll be an RSS feed up there. You can automatically get it to your phone, your iTunes, whatever, or just click play on the page. It's real easy. We'll see you guys next week.